Wow, that cliffhanger ending was brutal, especially because we don't even know if this show is coming back because it still has not been officially renewed by CBS. In fact, it reminded me of another show that was right on the bubble, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and what turned out to be its final season. And they ended on an incredible cliffhanger, really, where you were like, how can you not bring this show back? And Fox was like, watch me. And so we don't know if we'll ever see who was in that spacecraft that crash landed at the end of Supergirl season 1. But I have to be honest, I don't know if I want to see who's in it. I mean, when the UFO first streaked across the night sky, I was like, McGann, have our fan wishes been answered? But then and I was all like really cool when Supergirl and John Jones touched down. I was like, oh, the show is like giving us glimpses of what it could be in its season 2. But then as soon as they were like, it's a Kryptonian ship, I was like, man, kick that thing back into space. I am so tired of Kryptonians. And I would say that Kryptonians have been the Achilles heel of this show. Whenever the show hasn't worked, it's been because of Kryptonians. And it's really unfortunate that they were the way that the show went out in its first season, because the show went out on such a weak note. And with that cliffhanger ending being like, more Kryptonians. I mean, I think even the most fervent Supergirl fans, like myself, were like, you know what? Maybe the show doesn't need to come back. If it's just going to go in circles like this and keep making the same mistakes, maybe we should just let it go and have an Alex and John Jones show. I think that's the show we'd all actually really like to see. But anyway, because this might be the final episode of Supergirl, or at least this version of Supergirl, I thought we should end on a positive note. So we will be doing the worst list first, because again, also because it was easier to make, unfortunately, but because let's end on a positive note, much like that little cute like family dinner they were having, right? All right, so anyway, the 5 worst things in the final episode or final season episode of Supergirl. 1, the speech. The speech was so bad, and we all suspected it was coming from last week's episode, but many of us were like, they couldn't possibly do that, could they? And they did! I mean, I think what offends me about it the most is that this is the kind of like rainbows and unicorns and hearts logic that permeates entertainment that's supposed to be directed toward a female audience. You would never see in a show directed at guys the hero save the day by just appealing to everyone's better sense of self, right? It's like the female character always has like, oh, I can heal people with my abilities, or I'm a great philosopher. Like, look at Wonder Woman. They're like, Wonder Woman's an ambassador. Like, I don't know. I mean, some people like that version of Wonder Woman, and maybe some people liked this here. And Melissa Benoist, to her credit, did a very good job delivering said speech. But I mean, how can Peter Facinelli not be like embarrassed to deliver lines like, Myriad turns off the part of your brain responsible for hope? And I'm like, but they're not depressed, Max. The people are being controlled by a hive mind and have no will, no willpower, no autonomy. What does it have to do with a hope or not having hope? It just made no sense. It was very annoying. And I kind of, when they were going to have everyone's head explode, I really kind of wanted to have someone turn to Supergirl and be like, speech, 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 just to kind of underscore how ridiculous it is to say that speeches can solve these sorts of problems, right? Now, on that note, let's move over to the exploding heads, which was also something ridiculous about this episode. 1, how could Maxwell Lord's timing be that precise? And at the very least, why was no one worried about how precise it was? Like when Supergirl and Alex were having their final goodbye, I was like, why are you taking so long? I thought like Alex's head would explode at any moment, because like when you're uploading something to YouTube and it sticks at like 95% and then immediately jumps to 100, how do they know that wasn't going to happen with Myriad, right? They might not get the luxury of 96, 97, and 98%. I was like, you're so close to like the death point, Supergirl, just get Fort Ross out of there. And then also, I thought it was horrible that she didn't tell her close friends what was happening. I thought that was really selfish. Like, maybe they have their own goodbyes that they want to say, right? I mean, Cat Grant has 2 sons. Maybe she wants to spend her final hours with them. I'd be like, Supergirl, considering you only have like 4 hours to solve this, why don't you skip the goodbyes and spend the little time that you have on, finding these people or coming up with like a plan, right? Supergirl never takes time to formulate a plan because she's all like hearts and doodles in her notebook. That's what she has in her notebook instead of a plan. Didn't she learn anything from the Flash crossover? And then also, And really, and also, oh, by the way, with Jimmy, when she was, like, it was such a stereotypical trope of the genre where the hero's like, oh, I'm not going to come back, so I'm just going to make my loved one feel really crappy about this relationship so that they can move on with their life. I'm like, you don't think that's going to haunt them, right? Like, why were things so crappy between me and Supergirl? Jimmy's going to be like, before she died. Like, that's annoying. We never got to hash that out. Just say, everything's great. We're in a really good place. I'm a hero. You fell in love with the hero. I gotta go do some heroing. Might not come back, which is totally normal with heroing. So if we're gonna be together, you have to promise me that you're not gonna be like a total drag and make me feel even worse by like moping for the rest of your life, right? I mean, that's like, she should just be honest with him. And I wish that would happen all the time with these conversations. Also, why would the writers of the show put in a global threat that when they can only afford to show National City, right? I mean, and also, it's not that hard to show other parts of the world. Just cut to them, green screen in another background, and you could be like, oh, we're all over the world, right? They could have even at least had feeds in Cat Grant's office. It was super frustrating. And also, why didn't they tell any other nations in the world what was going on? I'd be like, there's only 4 hours. Let's get all the best and brightest minds we can on this, Max. I know, your ego is pretty big, but come on, let's teamwork here. And speaking of not telling people, that's the third worst thing about the episode, with Fort Ross. I don't know about you, but if I were Supergirl, I'd be like, General Lane, if I make it back from this, the first thing I'm going to do is punch you in the face. Because who hides Fort Ross just out in the open like that? Like, since when has nuclear test site ever stopped anyone? Go ask Bruce Banner or anyone who turns into a Hulk, right? Or anyone in real life. Even when they put like these big wire fences, people are always flying drones overhead these days and stuff. It just was so, when he said there was only one thing we could do, I was like, bury it under a bunch of dirt. They're like, nope, just leave it off out in the open. Also, they've been hunting Fort Ross escapees this whole show. And I guess it's my bad too, because I never asked where Fort Ross was. I assumed the DEO had taken care of it. Well, my bad. They need even more supervision over there, apparently. But the fact that Fort Ross was just sitting there and the DEO didn't know where it was, and, even when this started to escalate, General Lane still didn't think it was pertinent information. It just was absolutely ridiculous. And then when she had to fly Fort Ross into space at the end, and they're like, it's too dangerous, Supergirl. I was like, I've seen Superman fly into low orbit space all the time. And it's fine. He comes back all the time. Like, sometimes he just does joyrides out there just to get a good look. So I didn't understand where that was coming from. Then the fourth worst thing, obviously, were the Kryptonians. Horrible, horrible characters. And they were just annoying and stupid till the very end. Like, wasn't it, so ridiculously stupid that when Supergirl and John Jones showed up at Fort Ross, Non was like, lucky you, Supergirl. All the other Kryptonians are down for their nap. I was like, wake them up, Non. This is kind of important. It was just so ridiculous. I also didn't understand how Indigo could be beaten by being ripped in half, right? Doesn't she come apart as part of who she is as her powers, that she can reform? John Jones exploded her in an earlier episode. How does this ripping her in half, take her out like that? It was just really frustrating. Then the fourth most ridiculous or worst thing about the episode were Superman's feet. Now, I understand that this is something that happens a lot in sitcoms. It's it's something that you'll see in a lot of sitcoms, and at this point, it's kind of like a thing. The unseen character that never shows up. Like Maris on Frasier, right? Niles' wife. We never saw her. The Big Bang Theory, Mrs. Wolowitz. And I'm sure there are other sitcoms where you can think of another character that's always just off camera. But with Superman's not just some character. Also, they're very bad at the way they get around it, right? Like, these other shows have been very clever with that. But with Superman, they're just really sloppy. And at this point, you thought they couldn't get to a lower point than when he showed up last time and was immediately taken over by Myriad. You're like, that's kind of lame. But then when you just saw the soles of his boots in the med lab, and no one even paid attention to him, right? Kara was never like, oh, is he okay? Let me go check him first, John Jones. She was like, whatever, he's just lying there. The extra with the Superman boots on that he was. Also, speaking of his boots, who else noticed the soles on his boots? Because those were dress soles. What kind of superhero wears basically dress shoes to work, right? They're uncomfortable. They make noise when you walk on hard surfaces. And also, they're going to be slipping and sliding all over the place. So it was such a bizarre choice. And I was looking right at it that I was just like, this is a disaster. Which I think is in some ways summing up this show's inability to overcome really obvious problems. All right, so let's go to the best list, because I did like a lot about this episode, and I thought that at the same time that it highlighted what's wrong with this season, it also highlighted what's been right with this season. So this is kind of like me picking my favorite characters, basically. All right, so number one, Supergirl. I really like Melissa Benoist in this role. She really created a character that, in my opinion, is very, very real, very human. A kind of dynamic that you don't see with female characters that often. I've loved her hate and anger. I've loved her self-doubt. I've loved her compassion. And here you saw all those things in this episode. I loved it when she was fighting Non. I mean, that was really fantastic. With the I-beam to I-beam. I also really liked her discussion about self-sacrifice and why she was sent to Earth by her mother. So often when female characters sacrifice themselves, it's for a loved one specifically, right? But it's never like a sense of heroism or duty. So I really liked seeing Supergirl embrace that, and it meant a lot to me as a female viewer and a fan of this kind of, entertainment. The next thing I liked was John Jones. I have loved David Harewood on this show so much. I think he's so good in the role. I've liked John Jones before, but this show has taken him, in my opinion, to a new level. I loved seeing him work with Supergirl. I loved his relationship with both Kara and Alex. And I really would like to see him have his own show. I think that this was one of the best things to come out of this show, this season by far and away, was John Jones, and how he too was humanized. I mean, they did a lot to humanize aliens on this show, which I think is commendable. I also thought he looked very good for a television show in terms of visual effects. Now, third, speaking of his partner in crime, or defeating crime, that would be Alex Danvers. How cool was she in her kryptonite suit with her kryptonite sword? I mean, this has just been a fabulous character. And then when she took Supergirl's pod to go rescue her, I mean, she has been just such a fantastic, I think, counter to Supergirl, to show that a normal human being can be just as heroic and just as brave and just as flawed, that I've really enjoyed the dynamic between those two characters over the course of the first season. I like Alex Danvers so much that I would actually like to see her transition to the comics. I would love to see her become like the good Amanda Waller, right? Someone who deals with supers, deals with the DEO. I mean, I just think her character is a really positive role model for everyone. The actress playing her also did a fantastic job with her. I really liked this character quite a bit. And that leads me to another great female character to come out of this show who also doesn't have any superpowers, and that's Cat Grant. This show has done what I felt was the impossible, and that is make me a Callista Flockhart fan. It has made me understand, as I said when I first reviewed this show, why Harrison Ford likes her so much. She has just been really fun. I think in some ways they did kind of make her a Lois Lane, but she's not saddled with having to be a love interest, and that's really freed the character up, this type of character up. I would love to see Cat Grant also in the comics in this manner, because she's so good. I thought that everything that Kara said about her was true. I thought that Kat's reactions throughout the show, the season, and in this episode were very true to form. She never lost her edge, even though she did have a lot of heart. And I also felt that a lot of the business lessons that were imparted from Kat's character were very important for everybody watching the show, as well as Kara. I mean, not only about business, but about life. Kat, I think, was a great mentor to Kara and those of us watching the show. I'd also like to say that I really liked at the end when she gave Kara an office, and I liked that it had no window, and she said you have to earn a window, and that was really funny to me because I'm so glad to finally have my own office. For a long time I had to carry my computer into a conference room to do these videos when news broke, and I would bang the hell out of my computer and it would crack the screen, and it was just really difficult. So I was so happy to have my own office, but I still haven't earned a window yet. So I thought that was really great. And when she first went into the office, I was like, do you not have a window? Oh my God, that's going to be tough, Kara. That's going to be tough. So I liked it, especially for someone who needs to fly out of a window so often. Then finally, I have one more spot, and I struggled as to whether or not to give this to Jimmy or Wynn. And I decided that while I have liked McCad Brooks's Jimmy Olsen, for some reason, when he and Kara got together, all the chemistry of the relationship went away. Like, they're good at flirting, but for some reason, I don't feel them as a couple. I don't know what it is. There's something weird about them making out. Like, they seem like two friends. Like, when friends are like, oh, hey, maybe we're a couple. And then they're like, no, this is really bad. I mean, like, I kind of feel that way about Jimmy and Kara. I was rooting for them, but they just don't gel when it actually happens. So I couldn't give him the spot because I don't think Jimmy's been much beyond a love interest for Kara. But Wynn Wynn has been a really special character, so I had to give him the final spot because I also really liked what Kara said to him about being a great friend. Because it's really nice to show an example of, yeah, a relationship didn't work out romantically, but that doesn't mean you have to throw away the other person, right? That you can't really still have a strong relationship. And I hope that he gets a viable love interest going forward if the show does continue, because I don't want it to seem like he's just still hanging on out of some hope that Kara will change her mind, right? I want them to just legitimately be friends. I also, on top of that, think Wynn is a very interesting character. And I also wouldn't mind seeing him go to the comics. Although he does seem maybe, well, Amadeus Cho is in the other universe. He's a Marvel character. So you could maybe have him show up in DC. I think he's very, very smart. I think he's very nice. He's a very kind character. And I really like his backstory with the Toy Man being his father. I think that's really an interesting direction to go in. Way more interesting, when they reimagine that character as like a toy titan out of Japan, which, I could see where that was coming from. But while that was a good idea on the face of it, that really no depth came out of that. But the Toy Man's son, good at tinkering with things, good with technology because of his background, so there's always that chance that he could go bad. Having that like kind of hover there and him trying to maybe redeem himself, redeem his father, I just think was really interesting to explore. And so I liked Wynn, and I think Jeremy Jordan did a great job with the character. And, he went, just like Foggy over on Daredevil, went from being a character I really disliked to a character I really did like. And so I hope that if Wynn doesn't continue in the comics or on the show, that Jeremy Jordan gets more opportunities, because he really impressed me with what he ultimately ended up doing here. All right, so that's my thoughts on the final episode of Supergirl Season 1, and perhaps the final episode of Supergirl overall. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Be sure to leave them down below. Thank you so much for watching the show with me. We'll see if we're able to pick it up again in the fall, but I will be covering Game of Thrones when it starts on Sunday, so I hope you'll check back in with me for that. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.